Vedanta Vaman Gosai Maharaj ki jai. Nitya Vishtam Shripad Ashtara Shitashmad Srila Bhakti Vedanta Sai Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitya Vishtam Shripad Ashtara Shitashmad Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Gosai Maharaj ki jai. Nitya Vishtam Shripad Ashtara Shitashmad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Gosai Prabhupada ki jai. Nitya Vishta Maha-Bhagavat Srila Goksharas Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Nitya Vishta Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Shri Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Shri Bharaga ki jai. Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopal Patidashaguna Shrada Gosai Prabhu ki jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gopashad Vrinda ki jai. Namachay Shri Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Shri Kshetra Mandal Gaura Mandal Vaja Mandal Mathura Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Sarva Apishta Vedanta Giriraj Maharaj ki jai. Shri Radha Kund Shama Kund ki jai. Shri Mona Devi Ganga Devi ki jai. Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai. Shri Bhakti Devi ki jai. Shri Purnamasi Yoga Maya ki jai. Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev ki jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Grantaraj Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai. Tadiya Shubha Tirubhav Titi ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Samagata Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Shri Nitai Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Bo. Dandavat Pranam Hari Bo. One second. I'm having trouble with my second screen for a while now. Oh my god. What the heck? Sorry. Just give me a second here. Whatever. Okay. Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Radhikaya Priyatmane Shri Śrīmad Bhakti Vedanta Narayaniti Namine. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Śrīmate Bhakti Vedanta Swamiti Namine. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Namo Mahabhadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratishe Namaha. Guruve Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Tadalaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tadbhaktaya Namo Namaha. Yam pravrajantam anupetam apeta krityam Dvaipayano viraha katara ajuhava Putreti tanmayataya taravo binedu Stang sarva bhuta hridaya munimanatosmi. Narayanam namaskrityam narang chaiva narottamam Devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam udirayet. Shrinvatang svakata Krishna punya shravana kirtana Ridantasto yabhadrani vidhunoti suritsatam. Nashta prayeshvabhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya Bhagavatyuttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtaki. Tavaivasmi na jivami tvaya vina Iti vigyaya radhe tvam nayamam charanantikam. Bhaktya vihina aparada lakshay kshiptashtakamaaditaranga Kripa maitam sharanam prapana vrinde namaste charanaravindam. Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Oh, Dandavat Pranams Nandini. Thanks for your sweet encouragement. All right, so what were the 4 questions that Devotee asked? She asked Bhagavan Kapila Dev, her son, to please dispel my illusion of aham mameti, the false conception of I and mine. Not the true I and mine of the soul, but of the I and mine of this temporary body. And please explain what is the jiva in the material world, who's known as Purush, who's trying to falsely be the enjoyer, and Prakriti, which is to be enjoyed. We're actually supposed to be like Prakriti. We're supposed to be enjoyed by the Lord, but right now we're trying to be the Purush. We're trying to lord it over the material world. So then Kapila Dev, he explains how there are 3 different kinds of that Adhyatmika yoga, this the yoga system connected concerning the soul, is of 3 types: bhakti, gyan, and ashtanga yoga. Another word for gyan is sankhya. So then he explains a little bit about bhakti, and he explains the activities of sadhu and how we have to associate with such sadhus to get prem. And he gave this very important verse, how Krishna Katha and the association of sadhus is very pleasing and satisfying to the ear and heart, and can give you ruchi, asakti, bhav, and prem in sequence. So this is our process. It begins with hearing from the sadhus. And that's how we can make progress in this path of bhakti. And how even gyan and yoga are not complete without bhakti. And then Devahuti, she asks her second question, which is, what kind of bhakti should I perform to easily attain your feet? And so then, she explains, she asks him to explain gyan, by which one understands all the tattvas, and also explain yoga. So she asks him to elaborate on those 3 things, right? Bhakti, gyan, and yoga. And so, in answer to the second question, Kapila Dev explains how bhakti, he explains how such bhakti quickly destroys. Bhakti is performed without material desires, and it consists of bhakti through the mind, so the senses that serve the Supreme Lord, as confirmed by the scriptures and Guru, the mind that is exclusively dedicated to the Lord on a spontaneous level. Oh, sorry, I didn't read that correctly. Anyhow, okay. Yeah, so bhakti performed without material desires, consisting of senses that serve the Supreme Lord as confirmed by the scriptures and Guru, and the mind that is exclusively dedicated to the Lord on a spontaneous level is superior to liberation. So he's already explaining the supremacy of bhakti. Such bhakti quickly destroys the subtle body as the digestive fire consumes food. And then he explains the characteristics of the devotee in bhav. Of bhav attained by body bhakti and raganuga bhakti. Devotees never desire impersonal liberation. These are all their characteristics. I always engage in the service of my lotus feet. Devotees glorify my activities in the association of devotees, seeing my attractive smiling face with red eyes, They see my various benevolent transcendental forms. They talk favorably with me. Bhakti gives liberation without separate endeavor, even though the devotee doesn't desire it. The devotees don't desire the higher planets, the Ashtasiddhis, or even the kingdom of God, but they attain all benedictions in this life, and I award them my own abode there. The devotees are not deprived of any opulence or affected by time, because they accept the Lord as their lover, their son, their friend, and their friend in the spiritual world. So this is explaining Raganuga Bhakti, how we develop a relationship with Krishna in one of these four rasas. Then he explains Vaidhi Sadhan Bhakti, and then ends with Tivra Bhakti, the greatest benefit. So, now he answered her second question, to elaborate on Bhakti. And now this chapter 26, and chapter 27, he's elaborating on her third question. She asked him to expand on Gyan, on Sankhya. So what we read up to verse 9 yesterday. The benefits of hearing Sankhya. I will describe the different features of elements, knowing which one is freed from the influence of material modes, one attains perfection of self-realization, and it cuts the knot of attachment to the material world. Characteristics of the Purush. So Kapila Dev explains that the Supreme Lord, the actual Purush, he's without a beginning. He's Anadya. He's a supreme soul. He's transcendental to the modes. He's beyond the material world, perceivable everywhere, self-effulgent. By him, the entire creation is maintained. And then she explains the Purusha's interaction with Prakriti is just a pastime by his will. So he's not under the control, like Srila Prabhupada was saying in his purports again and again and again, how Bhagavan, the Supreme Lord, he's never under the control of Prakriti. He has nothing to do with Prakriti. But just as a pastime, he interacts with Prakriti, just by his own will, his own pastimes. But the Jiva's interaction with Prakriti is totally different. The Jivas, seeing the various forms offered by Prakriti, the Jivas become bewildered by avidya, unlike Bhagavan. The bewildered Jiva then thinks that he is the doer of activities by false identification with Prakriti. And this misconception leads the Jiva to the Jiva's bondage and repeated birth and death. So that's the difference between Bhagavan's interaction with Prakriti and our interaction with Prakriti. We falsely try to become the Lord and Master of material nature, but we aren't actually like Bhagavan is. So Prakriti is the cause of the Jiva's action. The cause of the Jiva's actions is Prakriti, because Prakriti is the cause of the Jiva's body, senses, and sense devatas. The cause of the results of Jiva's actions is Purush, the Jiva or the Lord, because the Jiva has his free choice either to serve his own senses and accept a material body, or to engage in Krishna consciousness and get a spiritual body. I can't read this word here. It's white, but I can't remember. What did it say? The mind, is it? The mind is the... No. I have to see, because I don't have a good memory. Maybe the mind is the bestower of the results of the Jiva's actions, but let's see. Anyhow, I need to find this out. Okay, so verse 8. Sorry, this is long. I need to do this kind of recap, otherwise I don't get it. It goes in one ear and out the other ear for me if I don't keep on. So the cause of the conditioned soul's material body and senses, and the senses presiding deities, the demigods, is the material nature. This is understood by learned men. The feelings of happiness and distress of the soul, who is transcendental by nature, are caused by the spirit soul himself. Okay. So yeah, now Devotee said, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, kindly explain the characteristics of the Supreme Person and his energies, for both of these are the causes of this manifest and unmanifest creation. And I don't know how much we're going to be able to get through today, especially because I gave this such a long recap, but this is what we're going through, just so you can see a chart. Pradhāna, the creation. So that first, the characteristics, unmanifested, eternal, aggregate of three modes, cause of prakriti, that, and then the products, the 24 elements. Yeah, we go through creation so many times in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, isn't it? Must be like 4 times now that we've gone through it. Okay. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Yattatri Gunamavyaktam Nittasara Saratmakam Pradhanam Prakritim Prahura Vishesham Visheshavat. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, the unmanifested eternal combination of the 3 modes is the cause of the manifest state, and it is called pradhāna. It is called prakriti when the manifested stage of, it is called prakriti when in the unmanifested stage of existence. Okay. Unmanifested is called pradhāna. It is called prakriti when in the manifested stage of existence. Okay. Sorry, I just need to read that again. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Lord points out material nature and its subtle stage, which is called pradhāna, and he analyzes this pradhāna. The explanation of pradhāna and prakriti is that pradhāna is the subtle, undifferentiated sum total of all material elements. Although they are undifferentiated, one can understand that the total material elements are contained therein. When the total material elements are manifested by the interaction of the 3 modes of material nature, the manifestation is called prakriti. Impersonalists say that Brahman is without variegatedness and without differentiation. One may say that pradhāna is the Brahman stage, but actually the Brahman stage is not pradhāna. Pradhāna is distinct from Brahman because in Brahman there is no existence of the material modes of nature. One may argue that the mahat-tattva is also different from pradhāna, because in the mahat-tattva there are manifestations. The actual explanation of pradhāna, however, is given here. When the cause and effect are not clearly manifested, it's avyakta, the reaction of the sum of the total elements does not take place, and that stage of material nature is called pradhāna. Pradhāna is not the time element, because in the time element there are actions and reactions, creation and annihilation. Nor is the jiva, or the marginal potency of living entities, or designated conditioned living entities, nor is the jiva, or marginal potency of living entities, or designated conditioned living entities. Because the designations of living entities are not eternal. I didn't understand that sentence. It's possible, whatever. Nor is it the jiva, or marginal potency of living entities, or designated conditioned living entities. Because the designations of living entities are not eternal. Anyways. One adjective used in this connection is nitya, which indicates eternality. Therefore, the condition of material nature immediately previous to its manifestation is called pradhāna. Okay, that makes sense. Everything. Yes, okay, this all makes sense. Okay. Panchabir Brahma Chatubir Dashabhistata Etat Chaturvishatikam Ganam Pradhanikam Vidu. Haribol, Mahaprabhu, I'm doing Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam reading, so I'll call you after. The aggregate elements, namely the 5 gross elements, the 5 subtle elements, the 4 internal senses, the 5 senses for gathering knowledge, and the 5 outward organs of action, are known as the pradhāna. According to Bhagavad Gita, the sum total of the 24 elements described herein is called the Yonir Mahad-Brahma. The sum total of the living entities is impregnated into this Yonir Mahad-Brahma, and they are born in different forms, beginning from Brahma down to the insignificant ant. In the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam and other Vedic literatures, the sum total of the 24 elements, the pradhāna, is also described as Yonir Mahad-Brahma. It is the source of the birth and subsistence of all living entities. Mahabhutani panchaiva bhurapognir marunabha tanmatrani chatavanti gandadini matani me. There are 5 gross elements, namely earth, water, fire, air, and ether. There are also 5 subtle elements, smell, taste, color, touch, and sound. Color? That's interesting. I always thought of sight. Anyhow, this would be a good test, though, to see if we can memorize the 24 elements. Indriyani dashashrotra tadrigrasana nasika vakaro charano medram payurdashama uchate. The senses for acquiring knowledge and the senses for and the organs for action, number 10, namely the auditory sense, the sense of taste, the tactile sense, the sense of sight, the sense of smell, and the active organ for speaking, the active organs for working, and those for traveling, generating, and evacuating. So there's the Gyan-indriya and Karma-indriya, right? There's 5 Gyan-indriya. The Gyan-indriya are the senses for acquiring knowledge. And then the Karma-indriya, the working senses. Okay. Afterwards, after we finish this, then we can break it up and try to memorize all these 24 elements. Right now, I'm just going to read through it. Mano buddhir ahankara shchittame etyantaratmakan chaturga lakshate bhedo vritta lakshana rupaya. The internal subtle senses are experienced as having 4 aspects, in the shape of mind, intelligence, ego, and contaminated consciousness. Distinctions between them can be made only by different functions, since they represent different characteristics. Okay, so there's first the 5 elements, then the 5 elements, what was next? The 5, senses, then there's Gyan-indriya, Karma-indriya, and now the subtle senses, mind, intelligence, ego, and contaminated consciousness. Distinctions between them can be made only by different functions since they represent different characteristics. The 4 internal senses, or subtle senses, described herein are defined by different characteristics. When pure consciousness is polluted by material contamination, and when identification with the body becomes prominent, one is said to be situated under false ego. Consciousness is the function of the soul, and therefore behind consciousness there is soul. Consciousness polluted by material contamination is called ahankar. Etavan eva sankyato brahmana sagunasyaha sannivesho maya prokto yakala panchavimshaka. All these are considered the qualified Brahman. The mixing element, which is known as time, is counted as the 25th element. Purport. According to the Vedic version, there is no existence beyond Brahman. Sarva kala vidam Brahma, Chandogya Upanishad 3.14.1. It is stated also in the Vishnu Puran that whatever we see is parasya brahmana shakti. Everything is an expansion of the energy of the supreme absolute truth, Brahman. When Brahman is mixed with the three qualities of goodness, passion, and ignorance, there results the material expansion, which is sometimes called Sagun Brahman, and which consists of these 25 elements. The Nirgun Brahman, where there is no material contamination, or in the spiritual world, the three modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance, are not present. Where Nirgun Brahman is found, simple, unalloyed goodness prevails. Sagun Brahman is described by the Sankhya system of philosophy as consisting of 25 elements, including the time factor, past, present, and future. Prabhavam Purusham Prahu Kalameke Yato Bhayam Ahankara Vimurdasya Kartu Prakritini Yusha. The influence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is felt in the time factor, whereas causes of fear and death due to false ego of the deluded soul, which causes fear of death due to the false ego of the deluded soul who has contacted material nature. Sorry guys, I don't know why I'm having a hard time reading. The influence of the Supreme Lord is felt in the time factor, which causes fear and death due to the false ego of the deluded soul who has contacted material nature. Purport. The living entity's fear of death is due to his false ego of identifying with the body. Everyone is afraid of death. Actually, there is no death for the spirit soul, but due to our absorption in the identification of the body as self, the fear of death develops. It is also stated in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 11.2.37, Bhayam Dvitiya Abhiniveshitasya. Dvitiya refers to matter, which is beyond spirit. Matter is a secondary manifestation of spirit, for matter is produced from spirit. Just as the material elements described are caused by the Supreme Lord or the Supreme Spirit, the body is also a product of the spirit soul. Therefore, the material body is called Dvitiya, or the second. One who is absorbed in this second element, or second exhibition of the spirit, is afraid of death. When one is fully convinced that he is not his body, there is no question of fearing death, since the spirit soul does not die. If the spirit soul engages in the spiritual activities of devotional service, he is completely freed from the platform of birth and death. His next position is complete spiritual freedom from the material body. The fear of death is the action of the kala, or the time factor, which represents the influence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, time is destructive. Whatever is created is subject to destruction and dissolution, which is the action of time. Time is a representation of the Lord, and it reminds us also that we must surrender unto the Lord. The Lord speaks to every conditioned soul as time. He says in the Bhagavad Gita that if someone surrenders unto him, then there is no longer any problem of birth and death. We should therefore accept the time factor as the Supreme Personality of Godhead standing before us. This is further explained in the following verse. Prakriter gunasamyasya nirvisheshasya manavi cheshtayata sa bhagavan kala ityupalakshita. My dear mother, O daughter of Swayambhuva Manu, the time factor, as I have explained, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead from whom the creation begins as a result of the agitation of the neutral, unmanifested nature. Purport. The unmanifested state of material nature, pradhāna, is being explained. The Lord says that when the unmanifested material nature is agitated by the glance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it begins to manifest itself in different ways. Before this agitation, it remains in the neutral state, without interaction by the three modes of material nature. In other words, material nature cannot produce any variety of manifestations without the contact of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is very nicely explained in Bhagavad Gita. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause of the products of material nature. Without his contact, material nature cannot produce anything. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita also, a very suitable example is given in this connection. Although the nipples on a goat's neck appear to be breast nipples, they do not give milk. Similarly, material nature appears to the material scientists to act and react in a wonderful manner. But in reality, it cannot act without the agitator, time, who is the representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When time agitates the neutral state of material nature begins to produce varieties of manifestations. Ultimately, it is said that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause of creation. As a woman cannot produce children unless impregnated by a man, material nature cannot produce or manifest anything unless it is impregnated by the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the form of the time factor. Anta Purusha Rupena Kala Rupena Yo Bahi Saman Vedesha Sattvana Bhagavan Atmamayaya. Also, later on, we were going to go through all of this, like recap it in a really basic way, just that we can. Tomorrow, when we go over this again. By exhibiting his potencies, the Supreme Personality of Godhead adjusts all these different elements, keeping himself within as the Supersoul and without as time. Purport. Here it is stated that within the heart, the Supreme Personality of Godhead resides as the Supersoul. This situation is also explained in Bhagavad Gita. The Supersoul rests beside the individual soul and acts as a witness. This is also confirmed elsewhere in the Vedic literature. Two birds are sitting on the same tree of the body. One is witnessing, and the other is eating the fruits of the tree. This Purusha, or Paramatma, who resides within the body of the individual soul, is described in Bhagavad Gita 13:23 as the Upadrashta, the witness, and the Anumanta, the sanctioning authority. The conditioned soul engages in the happiness and distress of the particular body given to him by the arrangement of the external energy of the Supreme Lord. But the Supreme Living Being, or the Paramatma, is different from the conditioned soul. He is described in Bhagavad Gita as Maheshwar, or the Supreme Lord. He is Paramatma, not Jivatma. Paramatma means the Supersoul, who is sitting by the side of the conditioned soul just to sanction his activities. The conditioned soul comes to this material world in order to lord it over material nature. Since one cannot do anything without the sanction of the Supreme Lord, he lives with the Jiva's soul as the witness and sanction giver. He is also Bhokta. He gives maintenance and sustenance to the conditioned soul. Since the living entity is constitutionally part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Lord is very affectionate to the living entities. Unfortunately, when the living entity is bewildered or illusioned by the external energy, he becomes forgetful of his eternal relationship with the Lord. But as soon as he becomes aware of his constitutional position, he is liberated. The minute independence of the conditioned soul is exhibited by his marginal position. If he likes, he can forget the Supreme Personality of Godhead and come into the material existence with a false ego to lord it over material nature. But also, if he likes, he can turn his face to the service of the Lord. The individual living entity is given that independence. His conditional life is ended and his life becomes successful as soon as he turns his face to the Lord. But by misusing his independence, he enters into the material existence. Yet the Lord is so kind that as Supersoul, he always remains with the conditioned soul. The concern of the Lord is neither to enjoy nor to suffer from the material body. He remains with the jiva simply as sanction giver and witness so that the living entity can receive the results of his activities, good or bad. Outside the body of the conditioned soul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead remains as the time factor. According to the Sankhya system of philosophy, there are 25 elements. The 24 elements already described plus the time factor make 25. According to some learned philosophers, the Supersoul is included to make a total of 26 elements. Daivakshubhita dharminyam swasyam yono parapuman adhata viram sasuta mahat-tattvam hiranmayam. After the Supreme Personality of Godhead impregnates material nature with his internal potency, material nature delivers the sum total of the cosmic intelligence, which is known as Hiranmaya. This takes place in material nature when she is agitated by the destinations of the conditioned souls. Purport. This impregnation of the material nature is described in Bhagavad Gita, 14th chapter, verse 3. Material nature's primal factor is the mahat-tattva, or breeding source of all varieties. This part of material nature, which is called pradhāna, as well as Brahman, is impregnated by the Supreme Personality of Godhead and delivers varieties of living entities. Material nature in this connection is called Brahman because it is a perverted reflection of the spiritual nature. It is described in the Vishnu Puran that the living entities belong to the spiritual nature. The potency of the Supreme Lord is spiritual, and the living entities, although they are called marginal potency, are also spiritual. If the living entities were not spiritual, this description of impregnation by the Supreme Lord would not be applicable. The Supreme Lord does not put his semen into that which is not spiritual, but it is stated here that the Supreme Person puts his semen into material nature. This means that the living entities are spiritual by nature. After impregnation, material nature delivers all kinds of living entities, beginning from the greatest living creature, Lord Brahma, down to the insignificant ant in all varieties of form. Bhagavad Gita 14.4. In Bhagavad Gita 14.4, material nature is clearly mentioned as sarva yonishu. This means that all varieties of species, demigods, human beings, animals, birds, and beasts, whatever is manifested. This means that of all varieties of species, these demigods, human beings, etc., material nature is the mother, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead is a seed-giving father. Generally, it is experienced that the father gives life to the child, but the mother gives its body. Although the seed of life is given by the father, the body develops within the womb of the mother. Similarly, the spiritual living entities are impregnated into the womb of material nature, but the body, being supplied by material nature, takes on many different species and forms of life. The theory that the symptoms of life are manifest by the interaction of the 24 material elements is not supported here. The living force comes directly from the Supreme Personality of Godhead and is completely spiritual. Therefore, no material scientific advancement can produce life. The living force comes from the spiritual world and has nothing to do with the interaction of the material elements. Vishvam atma gatam vyanjan kurtasto jagarankura sateja sapipattivram atma prasvapanam tama. Thus, after manifesting variegatedness, the effulgent mahat-tattva, which contains all the universes within itself, which is the root of all cosmic manifestations, and which is not destroyed at the time of annihilation, swallows the darkness that covered the effulgence at the time of dissolution. Okay. Purport. Since the Supreme Personality of Godhead is ever existing, all blissful and full of knowledge, his different energies are also ever existing in a dormant stage. Thus, when the mahat-tattva was created, it manifested the material ego and swallowed up the darkness which covered the cosmic manifestation at the time of dissolution. This idea can be further explained. A person at night remains inactive, covered by the darkness of night. But when he is awakened in the morning, the covering of night, a person at night remains inactive, covered by the darkness of night. But when he is awakened in the morning, the covering of night, or the forgetfulness of the sleeping state, disappears. Similarly, when the mahat-tattva appears after the night of dissolution, the effulgence is manifested to exhibit the variegatedness of this material world. Okay, we're going to end in just a few minutes because it's almost 8 o'clock. I'll read this first. Yat tat sattva gunam svacham shantam bhagavata padam yadahur vasudevakyam chittam tan mahatmakam. The mode of goodness, which is the clear, sober status of understanding the personality of Godhead, and which is generally called Vasudev, or consciousness, becomes manifest in the mahat-tattva. Purport. The Vasudev manifestation, or the status of understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is called pure goodness, or Shuddha Sattva. In the Shuddha Sattva status, there is no infringement of the other qualities, namely passion and ignorance. Let me close this. Okay. In the Shuddha Sattva status, there is no infringement of the other qualities, namely passion and ignorance. In the Vedic literature, there is mention of the Lord's expansion as the 4 personalities of Godhead: Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. Here, in the reappearance of the mahat-tattva, the 4 expansions of Godhead occur. He who is seated within the Supersoul expands first as Vasudeva. The Vasudeva stage is free from the infringement by material desires, and it is the status in which one can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or the objective which is described in the Bhagavad Gita as Adbhuta. This is another feature of the mahat-tattva. The Vasudeva expansion is also called Krishna consciousness, for it is free from all tinges of material passion and ignorance. This clear state of understanding helps one to know the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Vasudeva status is explained in the Bhagavad Gita, which refers to the knower of the field of activities as well as a super-knower. The living being who has occupied a particular type of body knows that body, but the super-knower, Vasudeva, knows not only a particular type of body, but also the field of activities and all the different varieties of bodies. In order to be situated in clear consciousness, or Krishna consciousness, one must worship Vasudeva. Vasudeva is Krishna alone. When Krishna, or Vishnu, is alone, without the accompaniment of his internal energy, he is Vasudeva. When he is accompanied by his internal potency, he is called Dwarkadish. To have clear consciousness, or Krishna consciousness, one has to worship Vasudeva. I do not understand this at all. When Vishnu is alone without the accompaniment of his internal energy, he is Vasudeva? I thought when Krishna is alone without his internal energy, he is Brahma. So I don't understand this part. Anyhow, this would be a good thing for me to get clear it up because I don't get it. Yeah, and when he's accompanied by his internal potency, he's called Dvarkadish. To have clear consciousness or Krishna consciousness, one has to worship Vasudeva. It is also explained in Bhagavad Gita that after many, many births, one surrenders to Vasudeva. Such a great soul is very rare. In order to get released from the false ego, one has to worship Sankarshan.
It's 8 o'clock.
Sankarshan is also worshipped through Lord Shiva. The snakes which cover the body of Lord Shiva are representations of Sankarshan, and Lord Shiva is always absorbed in meditation upon Sankarshan. One who is actually a worshipper of Lord Shiva as a devotee of Sankarshan can be released from false material ego. If one wants to get free from mental disturbances, one has to worship Aniruddha. For this purpose, worship of the moon planet is also recommended in the Vedic literature. Similarly, to be fixed in one's intelligence, one has to worship Pradhāna, who is reached through the worship of Brahma. These matters are explained in Vedic literature. All right, it's 22. Okay, so we just read about the element of time and its characteristics, the element of the mahat-tattva, 24 elements, and now chitta. We read about chitta. Tomorrow we will read about ahankar, the false ego, manas, the mind, buddhi, intelligence, indriya, and the tanmatas and elements. And maybe we can also get through the characteristics of tanmatras and the 5 plus elements. Anyways, we'll recap this all yesterday. This was a little bit difficult for me to catch everything, but I think when we do the recap tomorrow, we'll get it all. So, I mean, you guys probably already caught it, but I'm a little bit slow. And I don't have time to really study this on my own time, so I'm studying it along with you. I'm not studying it outside of this reading. So that's why I'm a bit slow sometimes to get everything. All right, thank you so much for sticking with me. This is really, very fulfilled. So it's a little bit thick and difficult to get through, for me at least. But I'm happy that you're all here to go through it with me. It makes it a lot easier for me to do it with all of you instead of doing it alone. All right, so I'll end with Mahamantra. Yes, Nandini, Sankarshan is the first expansion of pradhāna. It's true. Yes. Okay. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari. Jai Shri Guru Paramkanda Giridhari, Shri Radha Vinod Bihari Ju Ki Jai, Shri Govinda Gopinath Madan Mohan Ju Ki Jai, Nityalapa Vishnu Vishnupad Ashtatara Shatashmad Shila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Shila Gurudev Ki Jai, Nityalapa Vishnu Vishnupad Ashtatara Shatashmad Shila Bhakti Vedanta Vaman Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai, Nityalapa Vishnu Vishnupad Ashtatarashatashmad Srila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nityalapa Vishnu Vishnupad Ashtatarashatashmad Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Swami Maharaj Ki Jai. Nityalapa Vishnu Vishnupad Ashtatarashatashmad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Gosai Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nityalapa Vishnu Maha-Bhagavat Srila Bhakshras Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Rupano Gauriya Guru Varga Ki Jai. Shri Rup Sanatan Pata Raghunath Shri Jeev Gopal Patadash Guna Shara Gosai Prabhu Ki Jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda Ki Jai. Namachay Shlahai Ras Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Kshetra Mandala Gaura Mandala Vraja Mandala Mathura Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Sarva Abhishya Vidaki Giriraj Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Radha Kund Shama Kund Ki Jai. Shri Mona Devi Kanda Devi Ki Jai. Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Shri Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shri Purnamasi Yoga Maya Ki Jai. Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev Ki Jai. Shri Madhvacharya Ki Jai. Tadiya Shubhatirava Titi Ki Jai. Shri Grantaraj Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Gaur. Vrindai Tulsi Devai Priyai Keshavashita Krishna Bhakti Devi Satyavata Namo Namo Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sandhya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namo. Dandalakshana. So if I get time today, I'll also read about Madhvacharya. But yeah, we'll see. Alright, Hari Bol. See you tomorrow. Yeah, if you like it.